Good evening. My name is Jennifer Jumba, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2016 Northeast Ohio Public Policy Series. Tonight's program is titled Ohio Primaries. Before I introduce tonight's moderator, I want to recognize and thank a few organizations who were especially instrumental in making this year's Public Policy Series possible. Our program partners are the Laura and Alvin Siegel Lifelong Learning and Case Western Reserve University, the League of Women Voters, Cleveland.com, the Cuyahoga County Public Library, and the Lakewood Public Library. We are grateful to our corporate sponsor, First Interstate Properties, LTD, for supporting the series. I want to remind everyone about our next upcoming public policy session. On April 12th at the Warrensville Heights branch, Sharon Broussard will moderate a session titled Preschool Education in Cuyahoga County. During the question and answer portion of this evening's program, please write out your questions on the note cards provided, and our staff will collect the cards and bring them to the panel. It is with great pleasure we welcome Brent Larkin, former editorial director and columnist, the Plain Dealer, to the podium this evening. Brent will introduce all of our panelists. Brent Larkin joined the Cleveland Press in 1970, right out of college, and soon started covering Cleveland City Hall and politics. He covered the same beats after coming to the Plain Dealer in 1981. From 1991 until 2009, Brent was the director of the Cleveland Plain Dealer's editorial page. He now writes columns for the Northeast Ohio Media Group. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Brent Larkin.
Nice catch. Thank you. We're waiting for one more, but we're going to start anyway, so it's just Mark and I. Mark Naymik is a former politics writer at the Plain Dealer. He did a lot of things at the Plain Dealer, but he did politics for a long time, and he was a columnist at the Plain Dealer. Now he's a columnist for Cleveland.com. There's a difference. I hope you don't ask about it, but if you do, I'm going to have him answer it. And George Rodriguez, who is the editor of the Plain Dealer, which is a print version of what you see, and 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 times a week, and we assume he's stuck in traffic or weather issues. When I say this is lightly scripted, that pretty much means it's unscripted. Mark and I have talked about this for about 7 seconds. But I was thinking as I was driving out here, I don't know if Michael Barron is the gentleman who puts these things together, and he works really hard at them and he takes them really seriously. But I'm not sure if you scheduled this on Super Tuesday by design or not. I really am not. But as you know, this is, quote, Super Tuesday, and we're 11 or 12 states, depending on which party you vote in, are holding primaries or caucuses. And I was thinking driving out here, on Super Tuesday 32 years ago, I was in a hotel room on election night in Holiday Inn in Birmingham, Alabama. And because Alabama then, as now, was one of the states that voted on Super Tuesday. And the state lineup of the states that voted on Super Tuesday way back then were similar to the ones that vote tonight. And I was in Alabama because, like tonight, an Ohioan was on the ballot in 1984, and that was Senator John Glenn. And it was, tonight may or may not be Governor John Kasich's last stand, but Glenn kind of told the country beforehand that if he didn't do well on Super Tuesday across the South, that his campaign wouldn't last very long. John Glenn was a great American. He was a much better astronaut than he was a politician. And the day after Super Tuesday, I was in Washington when he withdrew from the race. But I was thinking about that campaign, which Tom Brzaitis and I covered almost from start to finish because of Glenn's entrance in the race, among other things. And the meanest or the most cutting thing that anyone ever said during the course of this long primary campaign that featured John Glenn, Walter Mondale, and Gary Hart was in Atlanta in the debate prior to Super Tuesday, when Gary Hart was running this insurgency campaign, and he was giving Mondale fits, and he was threatening to take the nomination away from him. When Mondale turned to him and mimicking a commercial, a Wendy's commercial at the time, turned to him, and some of you may remember this, it said, "Senator, where's the beef?" And that became the most well-known line of the campaign. And you think about that, and as opposed to what you hear on the nightly news every single night now, when people are talking about women having, candidates are talking about women having suggesting that a woman was having her period during the debate, when a candidate is making fun of a disabled person who happens to have a physical disability, when a candidate, is hounded for days about whether or not he is the Klan's candidate. It's just quite a contrast. And Mark and I are going to talk about these things for a few minutes, and I'm going to start by asking him. We're going to start by talking about the Republican primary process, because it is by far the most interesting. The Democratic Party, well, we'll get to that in a minute, but my question is what we're seeing in the Republican Party good for democracy? And it's a question I'm not sure I know the answer.
Well, first, let's start by saying it is the Republican Party's fault. Following the 2012 presidential election, where they didn't want a dragged out or a long process, they changed a lot of rules to move up primary states that have winner take all and condense this so that we could have a clear nominee early. And boy, did they get what they asked for, because now there's great irony in it. They are literally potentially locking in Donald Trump in a system that they created to avoid drama. So to answer your question, good for democracy, I'm probably going to be the contrarian and say, yeah, it's great, because now we are talking about race. We're talking about George Wallace more than we ever did in the past. And those are such, he's so loaded, and Trump is so loaded that this brings up, a reaction from the public. And look, we have Republicans now beginning to step out and say, I won't support this candidate. So maybe if anything good's come out of it is it's highlighted what issues America needs to be talking about. So yeah, it's good for democracy, but it's the GOP's own design that brought us here.
No one can say that they saw this coming that I have ever met or that I have ever heard of. But if you look forward from here, do you see him as the nominee? Because I have now, with great reluctance, I've come to the conclusion that that's almost inevitable.
I predicted earlier at an event on the air that it would be Marco Rubio and Clinton. I only have one half the equation correct. I will say that Trump is going to be the nominee. After tonight, within 30 minutes or so, they'll start calling most states for Trump, Texas being likely to go with Cruz. And if you just look at the numbers, go to the New York Times, any major site, it's going to be impossible to get the delegates that you'll need to win if you cannot do well tonight. And let's go over the list of those who are not doing well tonight. John Kasich, Rubio will struggle, and Cruz, again, maybe Texas, but that leaves one guy. There's 535-ish delegates up for stake tonight, and I don't see how they can stop Trump.
We're going to talk about Kasich in a minute. Since we're in the library, I'm going to recommend two pieces that are I have a lot of time on my hands, and two pieces on the Trump phenomenon that are by far the two best pieces I've read. One is the Matt Taibbi piece in the current issue of Rolling Stone, and the other is a piece by David Frum, who was a former George W. Bush speechwriter, which was in the Atlantic Monthly of, I believe, January, and both of them are really terrific. And the Taibbi piece is also funny and fairly mean-spirited, and that was my favorite of the two, but they're both really, really insightful. Mark mentioned Governor Kasich, who is in the CNN poll that was released yesterday morning, polled at 6% nationwide. For a candidate who's supported pretty deep into the process by 6%, he has milked this for a lot of exposure. He is the New York Times preferred candidate, which in a Republican primary process is the kiss of death. If the Sun newspapers were to endorse John Kasich, they would tweet that out and send out 1 million emails about it. When the Times endorsed him, they were relatively silent on it because it's not exactly an endorsement that you covet among Republican voters. But if Donald Trump gets the nomination, there will be a long list of people to blame for allowing that to happen. And he's a creature of the Republican establishment and to a lesser degree, but partially to the Democratic political establishment also. But if Kasich stays in the race, he is going to be one of those 100 or 2 people who are going to get some blame for this because he's under enormous pressure to get out and so allow the Republicans to coalesce around a single candidate, and presumably that would be Marco Rubio. I don't know if he's getting out or not. They don't like me at all. But do you have any insight as to whether or not he's going to stay?
No, I can tell you he is, I mean, it's real. He is getting calls from campaign funders, insiders, party leaders, to step aside for that reason that there's not a lot of time left to get behind an alternative to Trump. Kasich, as you know, has been on record repeatedly saying that he is staying until Ohio and that Ohio is do or die. Ohio, by the way, is winner take all this year. So he thinks this could give him the momentum, but that's 2 weeks away, 2 long weeks away. Kasich used to be saying he could do pretty well in Michigan, but that's not even looking so good, and that's next week. So I wouldn't expect you to, I mean, you would see something from him probably this weekend if he were going to step aside, but right now he's on record saying he's going forward.
Originally, they were going to win Michigan, and they took that off the table because it's now abundantly clear that Donald Trump is going to win Michigan because he's going to win everywhere else, except perhaps Texas tonight. But Kasich runs a risk if he stays in a race and stays on the ballot in Ohio, which votes 2 weeks from today, and if he loses to Trump in Ohio, it's a significant embarrassment to lose to this narcissistic, sexist, intolerant man who's crude. I'm not a big fan. I think it's a huge embarrassment to him if he loses to him, and they have their own polls that they don't talk about, and if his internal polling shows him losing Ohio, and especially badly, I wouldn't expect that he'll be around a week from Tuesday. And I agree with Mark. I mean, Mark and I kind of agree that Trump's nomination is inevitable. Let's go briefly, and we can always come back to the more interesting of the 2 races. But the Sanders candidacy is Bernie Sanders' candidacy is something that, in some ways, it's similar to what's happening with the in the Republican Party. No one saw it coming. It's kind of an insurgency. It's based on people getting support from people who are normally not deeply involved in the process. The difference being that, it seems to me, is that Bernie Sanders whether you agree with him or not, he stands for something. He's a man of principle. He has a certain amount of dignity to him. And the Democratic primary is, by most standards, especially today, is quite civil, in contrast to the other one. I expect that tonight he will be reduced to 1 or 2 Tuesdays away from having to call it quits, because after New Hampshire, and he scared her a little bit in Nevada, she's a known quantity who's been running for president for at least 9 years, and she has a political infrastructure in place, and she also has, and as you well know, the black vote is almost monolithic in terms of supporting, probably not deservedly, not even probably, not deservedly so, but it is what it is, and it's not going to change between now and the end of the primary season. What are your thoughts on the Democratic race?
Well, to jump off on a point that Brent made, you know, what you guys hear the same thing. I mean, Hillary Clinton is campaigning hard, even in southern states where she's going to win, but I think she is disciplined, and that Bernie Sanders, you know, put her there in that role of taking this extremely seriously, and that probably will make her a stronger candidate going forward. I've been reading the same things you have. The pieces are pointing out that she's already putting together a Trump candidacy plan, you know, and I was looking today. I've saved campaign literature since 2000, the flyers that come. I have a huge box, and I've been going through them. I'm going to put some of them up online so you can look back at what Hillary was saying about Barack Obama 4 years ago. And, you know, looking at that, you know, she was getting tangled up in some of the things that Bernie Sanders is bringing up. You know, contributions from Wall Street, oil, big oil. And when you read these, and I'll put them online, and I'll take off who they were paid for by, you might think these were Republicans, but this was, you know, people against her and her claims against Obama. Trade was getting thrown out. You know, these are things that come up in primaries and get you ready for the general. And I think Bernie Sanders has helped push the debate. That's the kind of the reason I say that in some weird, sick way that democracy benefited from Trump, because it really forced people to say, you know what, we don't want that. We want issues, we want discussion, and that's happening.
On March 15th, it could be a make it or break it day for the Sanders campaign in terms of delegates, because she's already piled up a big lead, and that lead will grow. And I'm actually working on a piece for this Sunday in terms of, think back 8 years ago when Ohio was a state that Hillary Clinton absolutely had to win. Was near the end of the process, of the primary process. Obama had amassed this huge delegate lead, and she put together a campaign in Ohio. You know, she ran as if her candidacy depended on it, because it did. And here's the result. I hope you can see a little bit of this. These are the 88 counties, and the yellow ones are the ones that Obama carried, and there's 5 of them. And this partially explains why Bernie Sanders cannot beat her in Ohio. I know he has a lot of people, especially a following among young people who are really devoted. He cannot win in Ohio.
Well, young people don't vote, so the college kids where Bernie is relying aren't going to turn out. If you look at that map and look to the southeast, what we call, or has been referred to as the Little Smokies, Appalachia, she had real big support, and she had help from former Governor Ted Strickland. I'm looking at the campaign literature today. They are featured hand in hand in many of the pieces of literature that went out. But that rural obviously makes a big difference. That's what attracted people to Bill Clinton, while the rural voters, you know, got frustrated with the problems that Clinton faced in the second White House tenure, there's still a real connection to those roots, and that made a big difference. And there's no way Bernie Sanders is going to connect in Southern Ohio, where I tell this story all the time, campaigning down there years ago. You know, people have signs in their front yard that say, "Vote the Bible." And they just see things differently. They work hard. There are people in Ohio that, in Youngstown, my in-laws are from there, and my father-in-law says, you know, he runs into some of these auto workers that have buttons that say, you know, they're voting for Trump. I mean, that'll be an issue. Again, they're not Sanders buttons. They're already on the Trump, and those Reagan Democrats in Youngstown, you know, they could be peeled off, and that'll be where she will have to look coming to the general.
And if you look at those yellow areas on that map, those counties are the ones with a heavy concentration of minority voters. And all those yellow counties, they're going to be blue 2 weeks from today. And she's not going to win 88 counties, but our point is that Ohio, if Bernie Sanders is going to need to build a firewall, Ohio is not the place where you try and cobble something like that together. So let's, as Mark mentioned, and the New York Times has a long story about this today, the Clinton people are already planning a general election campaign. So let's talk a little bit about, I'll let you go first if you'd like, about who's going to win, who's going to be the next, and how do you see that campaign unfolding? Let's assume, we're going to assume it's Trump and Clinton, because that's the likelihood as of right now.
I think it's a fascinating place to be. There's a lot of issues to take on, and I think one will be playing on the issues of the demagoguery, you know, particularly towards you know, the wall, the issue of the wall, and what that means. I mean, Clinton's going to be relying on Hispanic, minority, moderate, middle class, and she's going to be able to take him on all of these issues that run those racial elements, and that's one. So you're going to have that. You're going to have. I think she's looking forward to a foreign policy debate. So I'll let Brent pick it up.
Well, we're beginning to see the Republican Party splinter within the last 48 to 72 hours. And with people already coming up in Ohio, David Yost, the state auditor, was the first prominent one who said, "I will not support Donald Trump. I'll take a walk." I think that will become a phenomenon, a growing phenomenon. Here's where I think the Republicans are going to have a big problem. The Clinton campaign will raise and spend between, maybe let's call it $1.5 billion, because that's in the ballpark. I think the Republicans, I think at least half the billionaires who fund causes, Republican causes and candidates, are going to sit this race out. And I think Trump will have trouble raising money. I do not think they'll be able to compete. He's certainly not liquid in terms of his wealth. And I think money will become a big problem for them. I'm not a huge Hillary Clinton fan. I think she has an enormous amount of baggage. But I think she might just cream him, especially if the party falls apart. She is upside down in terms of favorable, unfavorable. The electorate 11%. She's 11 points upside down in terms of her favorable, unfavorable rating with the nation's voters. He's 35% up. You know, his negatives are 35% higher than his positives, and it's impossible to win unless you can change those numbers a little bit.
And there's another really important issue that a candidate has to rely on, you can't win without, and that really is the ground game And the best ground game is delivered by people that are motivated for you as a candidate. We've seen in Ohio it makes all the difference. You can't buy your way to a ground game. And I say, where will Trump's motivated supporters be in those many months before the election? Bush in 2004, set the standard, his campaign in Ohio. A lot was written about it, about how they had quietly worked to find the cul-de-sac mom, the person that was going to get at her kitchen table and get the other neighbors, and build that network. And Democrats took note of that and followed that system. Obama did it exceptionally well in his first election. You go out and you find supporters in places that aren't even Democratic leaning or vice versa, because those are still votes that matter, and having a network of volunteers to do that is something you can't buy. Now, Obama certainly had the money to buy support and put field offices, but it still needs real people. Who is going to be there for Trump? And without it, I think that's another, Hillary has a lot of negatives and a lot of people that dislike her, but she also has a pretty serious following, and those people will work for her.
There's the one race in Ohio that has the potential to get turned upside down, and to the Trump-Clinton race will impact to a degree that nobody can really say for certain, is the U.S. Senate race, where you're going to have incumbent Republican Rob Portman, who has reluctantly on record as of today, and this could change, is saying that he will support the nominee of the Republican Party, but he didn't say it with much conviction. And then he's running against Ted Strickland, who will win the primary 2 weeks from tomorrow against a young fellow I would argue is probably the better candidate. I just don't think we should necessarily send 75-year-old freshmen, to the U.S. Senate. He'll be running for re-election for a second term at age 81 or 82, and I just don't think that's really a good idea. But plus, he was not a very good governor. But he can be a member of the U.S. Senate. If Trump loses Ohio by 5 to 10 points, pick a number, Rob Portman will lose. He will not be reelected, and Ted Strickland will be a member of the U.S. Senate. And it will be really interesting to see how they handle this, because the Strickland campaign is already denouncing Portman every day for being a Trump, suggesting that he's going to be a Trump supporter. And they wouldn't be doing that in such a forceful manner unless they thought it would be the key to bringing him down.
Well, I can't add a lot to it, because that's right on, and I think you're going to have a pretty potent campaign face between Hillary, Strickland, and his very close friend Sherrod Brown. And Sherrod, not up for re-election this year, can be a real help to both of them. And I think it's who's there for Portman?
No, when the Clintons kind of were involved in recruiting Strickland to run for this seat. And he stepped into a void, and he's, P.G. Sittenfeld is a Cincinnati councilman. He's, 30, 31? He's Strickland, the Plain Dealer endorsed, or the Cleveland.com endorsed him. The Beacon Journal endorsed him. The Toledo Blade endorsed him. He's getting all the newspaper endorsements, but Strickland will get the majority of the votes, which matter a lot more. And so it will be Portman and Strickland in the general election.
And as this audience knows, that's a problem and a discussion we could have another, forum on, is just the short-term thinking of many parties, in particular the Democratic Party, with never wanting to develop a bench because they just want to win now. They had a chance with a guy like Sittenfeld because of the potential ideas. He's younger, can't raise the money. And so the party's like, all right, we're going to stick with this name, ID, and guy who can raise money in Strickland. And in the end, they're going to pay for it. We'll have a forum 4 years from now. We'll be talking about the mistake they made.
no one has paid more attention or written more about the one local race that's on the ballot, countywide ballot next in this primary. No one's written more about it than you, and that's the election for Cuyahoga County Prosecutor, which is a hotly contested race. It's the only hotly contested countywide race, and you want to talk about that for a minute, Mark?
Obviously, we're talking about Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Tim McGinty. In January, early January, I wrote a column before his Democratic opponent was officially in. That's Mike O'Malley, former assistant prosecutor, Parma law director, who, by the way, is not really gone. He's on leave, but technically he has to quit to come back. But they're holding him that seat. Just want to make that clear. This race is all about Tamir Rice. I keep saying it. The number 12 defines the race. And it wasn't until Mike O'Malley believed he had the endorsement and support of people like Congresswoman Marcia Fudge. Some ministers, they're certainly split. They're not monolithic on this. And some polls that suggest that McGinty was vulnerable, that he stepped in. And I say there is a good debate there. We talk about, both candidates now speak a lot about seeking support from the legislature for independent prosecutor on use of force cases involving police shootings. O'Malley actually defines it differently. He wants, even if there doesn't result in death or deadly force, they should be investigated and handled. There is a lot of inside baseball that's talked about between the two of them that I don't think matter to the voters, and that is McGinty mean? Is the morale low? Have they lost some good attorneys? You always lose attorneys in the office. I have looked at the rosters. They have lost some very experienced attorneys under McGinty, but is that really an issue that's going to drive voters? No, it's about judicial reform. And going back to that race, the race is close, in my opinion. It is McGinty's to lose, incumbent advantage. He's got wide name recognition. He has money. But this has been a big deal. People across the county have reacted to the Tamir Rice. Now, they have varying opinions on it, but it is penetrated, and that does make it a close race, and one that neither candidate is obviously taken lightly.
I get a kick out of the fact, Mark, that Congresswoman Fudge and a lot of other black leaders, political leaders, and the clergy are kind of rallying around the O'Malley campaign as if he were some civil rights icon. But I think they might be a little bit disappointed. I mean, Marcia Fudge he does have the overwhelming support of the black political establishment,
yes.
Correct? Marcia Fudge.
NAACP, many of the top ministers, top meaning larger congregations, are with him.
And Marcia Fudge is a creation of her best friend, the late Stephanie Tubbs Jones, and she took Stephanie's seat. And I find it kind of ironic that it was the O'Malleys who went after Stephanie for her support for Peter Lawson Jones when he was challenged by someone whose name, lo and behold, is O'Malley, Mike O'Malley's brother, Pat. And it was it was a lot of the same crew that were involved in a election for Ohio Democratic Party chairman who said some really nasty, racially tinged things about Stephanie that she never forgave this crew of people for during that election. I think it was 2002 or 2005. 2005.
It was a labor leader, yeah.
So the Congresswoman and all these people are rallying to the O'Malley campaign, and I'm not too sure they have a sense of the history involved there.
No, it just tells you how angry people are about the Tamir Rice case, that supporters of O'Malley are willing to accept a candidate that they don't see as maybe stronger than McGinty. They just care that he's not McGinty. And it's real. I mean, they acknowledge these flaws. We have Mike O'Malley, and his campaign hates when I say this, has not publicly stated whether or not he feels or believes, based on the evidence that you and I have seen, whether or not the officers involved in the shooting of Tamir Rice broke the law. He will not answer that question. How can you not answer that question? That's what this is about. Tim McGinty, we know, said they didn't break the law, and I told the grand jury that. That's why I didn't pursue it. So, what do you think, opponent? He will not answer it. That question is at the heart of it, and I think we know why he won't answer it, because that answer potentially alienates a lot of people, because that's what has divided us.
Someone in the audience wants to know if the county prosecutor should, as a matter of course, recuse himself from any shooting cases involving the police. My answer to that would be no. I don't know what yours would be.
No, but that is at the heart of the issue of an independent prosecutor, because prosecutors work with police all the time. Can they ever be objective? I support having an independent prosecutor, but is it realistic? I don't know. We need the money. We need an independent group. We need... There's so many things that have to happen that in most cases it's not a problem, but in these high-profile cases we feel like we want one. I get that, and I think that's not unreasonable. But let's be honest, that this, the debate is about, is it even practical? And I don't see the state lawmakers supporting setting up and creating an independent prosecutor for this. And even the plans right now before us, the candidates want, in O'Malley's case, for the, BCI, the State Investigative Unit, to handle the cases, turn them over to the AG decide whether or not charges be brought, and then they handle it. The idea of an independent prosecutor in Cuyahoga County to handle every single one of these, probably not realistic.
Let's stay close to home. Someone wanted to know if Nina Turner, who was former state senator, who has a prominent national role in the Sanders campaign, will be punished for supporting Sanders. Well, she's not an office holder now, and Nina, say what you will about her, Nina has guts. She has taken on she was vilified in the black community for supporting county government reform in 2010, I believe, and 9 or 10. And there was another issue where she really showed, and Nina Turner wants to be mayor of Cleveland, but mayor of Cleveland doesn't, I don't think she'll be punished per se, and I don't think it hurts her, the fact that her candidate's not going to win Ohio. She wants to be mayor of Cleveland, but it doesn't look like the mayor of Cleveland's going anywhere. That's another question. I came away from a 2-hour meeting with him about 6 weeks ago, absolutely convinced that he's going to run for a 4th term. I don't think he should. It's too long. It's too hard a job, and you need a fresh set of eyes in that job, in a new way of looking at problems. And Frank's been there a long time. He and Mike White will be the longest two people who have served as mayor longer than anyone. If he goes another term, he will have been mayor 16 years. He just should not do it, and I think he probably will do it. What do you think?
Yeah, he has talked around the edges on this issue, that if he doesn't feel there is a candidate out there that can carry forward many of the fiscal restraint, now obviously the police reforms, and carry the city forward, he will do it. I mean, he has no aspiration for higher office. He's very legit on that issue. And, you know, he could take it or leave it. He's not a guy that is even double dipping. He could. He's been in office long enough. He's not, quote, retired. I mean, he does what he feels is right for the city. I think there is an argument to be made that we could use new eyes, new personnel looking in on these departments. There are a lot of things going on in other cities that are a little more progressive that could be tried here that haven't. While Brent's looking at questions, I want to throw out just a quick plug here. We have Mike West from the Board of Elections here. He's waving in the corner. He has ballots that if you haven't voted, you can vote, and he can get those in. You see him, and he'll take care of you.
He has applications. You're not
I'm
lugging
sorry.
around the ballots,
Right,
are
I'm
you?
sorry, right. Yes, the applications for those. But I told them that this crowd most likely is already squared away and probably voted, because they're people that show up to these things are pretty active and smart about all that. But he's here if you need him.
We have enough questions already to last till about 10 o'clock, which is not going to happen. Why are so few candidates from statewide candidates coming out of Northeast Ohio these days?
Well, I think we know some of the answers. This has to do with that issue of doing a poor job of building a bench. We had a lousy bench leader named Jimmy DeMora for a long time. Now, I know that there are plenty of people around that believe that Jimmy did a lot of things that were good because he paid attention to, you know, precinct battles and a lot of this inside baseball, where our current county chairman, Stuart Garson, doesn't pay attention to that. That's actually weakened him and has some people calling for him to get out of the way. But Jimmy was not a progressive, was not a big-term thinker. All Jimmy believed in that mattered was that Cuyahoga County could get, 275,000 more votes than anybody else in a presidential election, over the Republicans, and he could win, and he did, and he would argue that he did. But there is a cost to that, and that is, too much of this trying to order how people run and whose turn is next, rather than encourage and foster the debate on the issues in the young people and look for that larger office. And it's never happened. I blame part of that party leadership.
And now, don't forget, we had a governor for 16 consecutive years, uninterrupted, well, that's redundant, but who lived in the city of Cleveland. Dick Celeste for 8, and George Voinovich for 8. And that was a while ago, but it wasn't in the dark ages. I mean, Voinovich, and the fact of the matter is that Greater Cleveland is, as we all know, an overwhelmingly Democratic region. Okay, two things. The growth areas in Ohio now are in the Southwest and Central. Sometime this year, Franklin County will become the largest county in Ohio. Those are the growth areas. And Ohio, in the years we elect statewide office holders, which is the off 2 years after 2 years after every presidential, or before every presidential year, Ohio is not an especially competitive state. Democrats can win statewide, but it leans Republican. And that explains why 6 of the last 7 elections for governor have been won by Republican candidates. It's not always because the Republican candidates are better and they have more money. It's just they have a built-in advantage. And that also works, in addition to the factors that Mark talked about, that also makes it really tough to elect statewide out of Cleveland. Who's going to run for governor in 2018? I know it's a little too early, but here's what you look for. The only way not the only way. The best chance for the Democrats to win the election for governor in 2018, by far the best chance, is for Donald Trump to be president. then they probably will win the governor's election in 18, because it always follows, if there's a Republican in the White House, that will help the Democratic Party, I mean, in Ohio.
But
It's just a fact.
at least on the Republican side, Brent, it's a lot easier. We know another gentleman who's been running for a while, John Husted, Mike DeWine would be two statewide office holders, and maybe you can throw in now some of the other lawmaker, the House and Senate leaders that are eyeing some larger office. I don't know that it'll go all the way to governor's side, but the Republicans got a deeper bench, so to speak, and definitely you're going to see the battle there. The Democrats to emerge, don't know yet.
There's been another question was who Trump will choose as his vice presidential nominee. Who knows? I mean, it's just, my crystal ball isn't that good. It could be, somebody who builds walls. Who knows who it's. I don't think it's impossible that Kasich would be asked, and my guess is he would turn it down if it were Trump. Do you have any? I've read a bunch of actors' names. I've read Joe Scarborough's name. Who knows?
I mean, obviously people throw out Chris Christie now that he's willing to get there, and Trump would need somebody, I think, with some legitimacy in pure politics and being, someone that can run something. I don't know whether Christie fills the bill or not, but they would certainly be better than an actor.
He's not going to be president, but you mentioned the Senate. You think he might run for the Senate?
Kasich,
Yes.
It's certainly stuff that people have speculated about. I think you got to go somewhere, and that's usually a nice place to go. Governors tend to go there.
He hates Josh Mandel. It's a two-way street. There is really bad blood there.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, there are 5 statewide offices. They're all Republicans. The 4 who are not governor, not one of them, and trust me, when I'm 100% certain of this, not 90, not one of them likes John Kasich. Not one of them. They all dislike him in varying degrees. Not necessarily because he's been a bad governor, overall, but because he's a really difficult guy to like. Right?
Yes.
Right.
He's able to say it a little easier than I am.
It's really easy when you're a part-time.
Well, I recently, we talked about when the national media was picking up the news after his win. People then said, oh, yeah, let's take a look at John Kasich. And did you know that he once called a police officer an idiot during a traffic stop? And, people started to get into his prickly personality, and I think I recently said on the radio that, if he wins again, we're going to learn about how he told people in Columbus right after his first election for governor that if people didn't get on his bus, meaning get his way, he was going to run them over. And that, I'm saying, watch for that, because if he wins something else, I don't think he will, but we'll be hearing about that. He's been, his personality is very, very difficult, and he thinks it's funny sometimes when he wants you to think he's joking, but I don't know that he is.
This is a great question I hadn't thought of. When was the last time there was a brokered convention? I don't know the answer. I know 1980 was Kennedy Carter in New York when Kennedy challenged the president, but it was close to being a brokered convention, but it didn't quite get that far. I think I was alive, but in 52, but I think 52 was close also, and that's when Eisenhower kind of went in and took the nomination away from Bob Taft, Senator Bob Taft from Ohio, who had spent a whole life preparing to be president, and Eisenhower war hero status. That was close to being a brokered convention, but it's been a while.
I don't remember. It's out there because I know a lot of people have been writing about it because we love to play that idea. Could we have a brokered convention? And I think that's faded, but it's probably easy to find in one of the major news sites.
Why won't Strickland debate PG? He needs to get ready to debate Portman, and it would be, someone suggested it would be good practice.
Well, we know that's tried and true politics, that you don't debate a candidate that has no chance because you're just giving them a stage and an opportunity to trip you up. I hate when they do that, but every candidate has done it. I mean, look, even someone is serious and lofty and legit as Dennis Kucinich wouldn't want to debate his people, the people challenging him in races over time. Did we ever get one between him and Simperman when they ran? I don't think we did.
Yes, we did.
Did we?
Yes, we did. One.
One.
Right.
Okay. But no, they don't want to share the stage because it does give a greater stage to the opponent that they think is lesser.
And Strickland is really vulnerable among Democrats on the gun issue. Just among Democrats, he's not vulnerable in a general election. And he has a lifelong A rating from the NRA, and he's tried to amend his what amounts to a lifelong position on guns for this particular race, especially since it's every other word out of Hillary Clinton's mouth, who is he's her candidate, is about the need to do something about the proliferation of guns. And he goes into these contortions trying to explain himself, and he doesn't do a very good job. But I wish he had a meeting at the Plain Dealer or Cleveland.com that amounted to a little debate.
Yeah,
Were you there?
No, it is online. We have the entire thing unedited. You can find it there, and that is sometimes these editorial endorsement meetings are the closest thing that you can get to a debate. Cleveland.com requires that each candidates come in alone, and that we, with few exception, require them to both come at the same time, so we can get that.
Where's Mike? Did he leave?
Mike West is still.
Yes.
Are you still here?
No.
Oh, maybe stepped out.
Someone is it possible the Republican Party will split? Well, I think we've talked about that. Someone wants to switch to a Republican ballot this year, after having voted in a Democrat.
Yes, you can.
You just have to sign a statement saying, that's gone.
They track you. There's movements to get you to have to sign and all that, but you don't declare a party in Ohio. You are identified as a Republican or a Democrat based on the primary ballot that you've polled.
Why do the candidates spend all their time mouthing each other instead of talking about the issues? Well, because Donald Trump doesn't know anything about the issues, and he's on television. He doesn't have to spend any money in this campaign because his shtick, if you will, calling people names and making promises that there is that percentage of him keeping. He owns the airwaves, so if he talks about issues, people are going to grab the remote.
Hey, well, it is worth pointing out that I think there's a pretty, you can see it in a good consensus that the Democratic debates have been a lot more substantive because you have two smart candidates that know issues and that aren't yelling at each other, and it's not about their things, their personalities. And that is what's so sad about the GOP side of things with the Trump factor in there. And really, I mean, think about it. The first major debate, which was here in Cleveland, I mean, the questions are about Trump and his, whether casinos went bankrupt and, his battles with the media and what he said about women, and things have just not gotten any better. The Democratic debates have had a lot more issues to it.
I'm sure somebody up there here tonight is seething over the things that we've said about Donald Trump. If there's anyone who wants to have their say on that issue, we would be more than willing to be put in our place.
I mean, from a media standpoint, I do think, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, right? Trump's good for ratings. People will read the stories, his headlines generate clicks. But there's part of me with my columnist hat on that really that thinks that we have not called him out enough for the things that he is saying, things that don't make sense. We should never report that he has a plan to build a wall, because he can't. How the heck would he do it? How would he pay for it? How would that work? But we've blown past that. Because it's such a lightning rod issue, and it's one that has been, I think, central to his building up support from those on the wall. But and I think it's going to happen as he becomes a front runner. Now, we have to know more. But he's gotten away with a lot.
But he taps with his supporters, and there's a lot of them. He taps into this resentment over big media, and we're part of this, he spends a little portion of every rally denouncing the press.
Well, if he hangs in there long enough, us big media won't be that big anymore, won't be? Yeah. If you haven't noticed.
We're getting smaller every day, right? But the media's on his list, and he wouldn't bring that up constantly if it didn't resonate with a large segment of the electorate. A lot of Republicans party split. Independents can vote in primaries.
And Mike is back here. He's back in the room from the Board of Elections. So if we did have any specific question on that, Mike, we were going over earlier in Ohio, you don't formally declare a party. You're going to track somebody based on the primary ballot that they polled.
Brought that up. Give me 30 seconds. We've got a campaign going now called Join the Party. Voting's festive, it's a party, but the other side of it is, this is the only way you can establish your party affiliation. This is the only way you can change your party affiliation. This is the only way you can eliminate your party affiliation, is by voting in the March primary. It is our hope that even if we have two front runners and people are tempted to stay home, they vote because it's important to them to either, again, change parties, establish a party affiliation, or ask for an issues-only ballot and be considered nonpartisan. So, please keep that in mind. I'm sure everybody here is going to vote, but encourage your friends and family to do the same. So it's very important. You won't get another chance to do this for 2 years when the next partisan primaries come up.
Thanks, Mike. And that's what we were saying. So, yeah, you're tracked based on by your activity in the Democratic primary.
Here's a great question.
I'm sorry, in the Republican Democratic.
What happens to a candidate's money, campaign funds, when he or she drops out of the race?
Well, let's go back to where you started with Glenn. He still owes money from that presidential race you were at.
And he's stated he will never repay them.
But that's a case where you didn't have the money.
Well, you're an expert on some races. There's the rules and the laws are pretty liberal. He used to write several pieces, more than several.
Once a
But
year.
Mike White, when he left the mayor's office at the end of 2001, he had about $1 million?
$1 million.
Go ahead. In his account, and Mark wrote,
In Ohio, you can take that money and donate it to a charity, a nonprofit. In Mike White's case, he created his own nonprofit and charity and gave the money to that, which many of you probably have read stories about, the alpaca farm in southern Ohio. That's owned by Seven Pines Foundation that he created.
he pays his wife too,
And then
right?
his wife would manage that political activity of donating money to him, to his own foundation, and she would, I think, was getting about $30,000 a year And eventually, and he would, give a little money here and there, but he had freedom to do it as long as it was going, within these charitable setups, and he had lawyers set it up and eventually drain that whole account. And Ed Fitzgerald had some money left after his run, and I think he talked about trying to create, I don't know, music festival or something. I'm not sure what he's doing with it, but you can do a lot with it. Just can't.
If you're running for federal office,
the restrictions are different.
you can't do much with it. You can't use your $1 million and take all of that and go run for governor again. The rules are very different when it involves federal money. So in the governor Kasich's case, he might be able to use some of that to run for the U.S. Senate. I don't know how that would work in 2018, but he can't use it to run for office in Ohio again.
They can give to other equal campaigns, like, in Ohio, non-federal, Mike White or Ed Fitzgerald, they can donate that money to a candidate within the limits that are established. And on the federal level, you can donate within some of those campaigns. But yeah, how you convert it to a different level is restricted.
Are you following the redistricting, congressional redistricting issue and its attempt to get that on the ballot this year?
I haven't been following closely, other than we have an opportunity, and there doesn't seem to be moving.
Well, the Ohio House seems to be speaker just doesn't seem like he wants to do it, right?
Yes.
And so if the Republicans don't want to do something in Ohio, you have to go around them and get signatures to take it on the ballot, because they control everything. And they've controlled everything for 90% of the last quarter century. And that could change, but it won't change dramatically, and it won't change long term. We're not going to become a Democratic-leaning state anytime soon. And in fact, the trend, especially given the population losses in Northeast Ohio, the trend continues to go the other way. Is there anything we've missed that anyone else would like to? Michael?
See, is it going to go well? Are we ready?
I will be stunned if something major doesn't go wrong. I will. I mean, I'm not kidding. It's not. I will be stunned. But Mark follows it more.
Well, we've had a few stories. We've changed. The local leader of that was our former publisher, Terry Eggers, who got pushed aside. There's no question about that, because they didn't think things were moving along. And the head of our Convention and Visitors Bureau, David Gilbert, is now Dave Gilbert is the point person. We were slow to lock up those hotels, and that really wasn't the fault of the RNC committee as much as the hotels like to play a little games with it, because they want to make sure they can get the most money, and that's now in line. The federal government, as you know, gives a big chunk of money for security, police overtime, et cetera. Now, cities recently put in requests for how they will use that money. What I never can get a straight answer on is exactly, have we raised enough of the private funds? What is the real number? They need to raise 35 million in private donations. People begin to get tapped out. We'll really begin to see this as we get a little closer, and it is coming up now. As we begin to nail down, we've had a piece recently about restaurants. And somebody who's been to conventions, let me mention this. This is not a boon to every restaurant down there. In fact, it's a nightmare, because you can never staff up for 3 nights of massive crowds that all come at 10:40. Okay, you just can't do it. Leaving Denver and everybody's hungry, you rush in and they just can't serve you. There's just no way to do it. Caterers get a little more planning. There's some, rentals of space work well, but I'm dying to see how the restaurant, will the airport be done? This is probably where we're going to see our first issue. I know we keep saying and hearing that it's going to be done, hang in there, but I want to see the quality of the work that's done. Are we going to, You know, is what we do going to stay, or are we going to do things to shortcut it to get it done and then go back and redo it? I mean, these are things I want to watch for. You know, or is our transportation system going to be in play? Let's just, you know, face it. The easiest way to get in would be through the, you know, through the RTA Rapid, but people aren't going to do that. They'll take Uber, and they're going to take taxis and livery services, et cetera. We'll begin to see some of these issues coming up, and then the biggest being, what will we do about the protests? Where will this protest zone be set up? As you know, in every 4 years, they try to set it up, I don't know, in Michigan.
Fair lawn.
Yeah, you know, it's as far away as you can get. I have reported that the city has looked into buying protest insurance. I wrote a column where I said that the city should put that cost on the RNC because it's like $1 million. As you know, City of Cleveland's self-insured, so they pay any lawsuit fees and legal fees as they go. But this potentially has, you know, the whole issue of protests and arrests. And the city is very difficult on that. They have to pound them just to even get an answer. Who are we looking at? Have we purchased it yet? What are we going to do, and who's going to pay for it? That's a big issue. The civil rights issue. You know, and then you combine that with the tension that's already in the city over police shootings, police reform. This is the stuff to watch for.
The reason I said that, is the Plain Dealer and Cleveland.com have done a really good job in the last 6 to 12 months of pointing to significant mismanagement, significant in the city's police department, in the water department, catastrophe, in
Airport.
the airport, in the
Public
health
utilities
department, where
issue.
the health department,
Lead
where children are
concerns.
exposed to lead paint, and they do this many inspections. It's a crime. What department?
Well, and
the-
local TV, because it's good and visual, seems to have a piece every other week about poor vehicles, the workers not, filling potholes.
Services.
And part of that answer was, well, we don't get the asphalt delivered at the right time, so everybody has to surround me. You do say to yourself, and as you know, we're now, the city of Cleveland is going forward with the plan to ask voters to support an income tax increase.
And they need it.
Which is the lifeblood of their the tax revenues that they receive. City's got a lot of issues.
And they need more money desperately. However, that in and of itself doesn't guarantee that the city will be better managed. And it is really poorly managed right now, and the mayor gets really pissed off when you suggest that. But, it is what it is. That's to quote someone. I think the problem will be at the airport, and Mark dabbled in that for a minute. Let's assume it's all fixed up. It's narrow, it's hard to get into, it's hard to get out of. You're gonna have all these people arriving within a 72-hour period. It's hard to imagine the airport being able to service all these people. It's just really hard. When you're going to drop somebody off or to go meet somebody with the bags, it's a nightmare, in this little 2-bit market that we live in. It's going to be
It's like the
It's
restaurant
going to be a
effect.
challenge.
You can't staff up and be ready for something so big and so concentrated when we don't have the infrastructure for it, and that's that'll be very much a part of the story locally. The national
what
media
you're
will
going to be
focused
doing?
on-
My goal is to not have to do it. I've been to 5, and that's enough. I don't want to.
Yeah, no, I don't
down.
know what our roles will be, but it's obviously downtown in the media center, when they always have it separate from.
Is
where
that in the convention center?
Yeah, so it's about the same distance to
Yes.
to Cleveland.com, so I'll just walk over there. But there'll be a lot of stories around this. Again, I think the demonstration, and every convention, by the way, Democrat or Republican, draws protesters. When I was in New York in '04, so that's the first post the invasion of the Iraq War. I went in a day early to cover, just to be part of, watch it. They had a peace or anti-war protest that had hundreds of thousands of people in New York City walking around, and they tried to get to the hotel where the president was going to be staying. And and then in Denver, which is the Democratic side, you have fewer but equally rabid protesters. I know I could not get into the convention center, or it was at the arena, and then the nomination speech was in the stadium. But you couldn't get there without going through the anti-abortion rights protesters with the big signs of fetuses, and they wave them at the Democratic, groups going through. So protesters on a whole different side, and then those that still don't think the Democrats are doing enough. So you get it. And now in this case we have Republicans, so that'll draw its own. And then you add in I think the police issues, and we'll have a very lively debate.
Anything else? Yes.
Is it at all possible for the Republican Party to split before the election and to put up a third candidate?
Well, Michael Bloomberg was thinking about running for president. I would have voted for him, but he was only going to run if it was Sanders against Cruz or Trump, and I think that's now highly unlikely. He could buy and sell Donald Trump 15 times at least, but
On the way over here, NPR had a piece about discussions where they were trying to get Cruz and Rubio to run together as a ticket, but the idea of which one would step down to be number two. But they felt that would possibly be enough to pull the others in. Now again,
you're talking about for the nomination, or
for
is
the
it
nomination? Yeah, I know you're asking for going into the general. But the problem with that is if you're a Republican, you almost ensure the Democrat wins, because you're breaking up what happens. I mean, it's the Ross Perot and what he did.
Whoever
the
the top person would be would have to hire a food taster.
Right.
Okay. Yes. Oh.
Now in the Republican Party with the split and the people saying, all these people coming out and saying they're not going to back Trump, even if Trump gets the nomination and everything else like that, aren't they basically just handing the election to Hillary?
I think it's a bit more complicated than that, but I think at the end of the day, you might be right, yes.
The super PACs, and Karl Rove gave an interview and was questioned significantly on this point. Would you still, for the sake of the party representation in the White House, run ads against Hillary? And their answer was yeah. But I go back to my earlier point, though. But if you still need, because we know money doesn't always work, Jeb Bush. We know that you need people motivated for a candidate, not just against. And the PACs are motivated against Hillary, not necessarily for their guy.
Back to your point for a minute. The mouthpiece of the Republican old line political establishment is the Wall Street Journal. I get it. I get that. I get too many newspapers. But almost every day there is a column or an editorial, an anti-Trump column or editorial. Today there were two, but Rupert Murdoch despises him. And it's tough to see Donald Trump overcoming that incessant banging of the drum from the Republican establishment, and which is going to force a lot of people to take a walk. Somebody else, yes?
True, and Trump was the nominee. Do you think there would be enough of a swing for the Democrats to take over the Senate?
Yes. Oh, I think before all this happened, they had a good chance, because I think there's twice as many Republican seats up this year as Democratic seats. I think that if Trump is a nominee, I think they will take the Senate back. And that's what the smart Republicans are looking at. Wait a minute, we're going to lose the Senate. That means we're going to lose the Supreme Court for 30 or 40 years. We're going to lose everything. And they know that. And there's not a damn thing they can do to stop this, you know. Hey, I'm not a doctor. I think he's mentally unbalanced. I do. I think there is something mentally wrong with him.
The grade school level of the talk that comes out?
Yes,
that said that Trump was the first
and
president.
Peggy Noonan, who's another established, she's this revered Reagan
Speechwriter for
speechwriter.
Reagan, yeah.
Well, she almost went there about 2 Saturdays ago. She used the word unstable. Well, what do you think? She was talking about the same thing I've just talked about.
The lady up here in the sweater, yeah, go ahead.
I had another question, but after you're talking, maybe this is simplistic, but why is Trump winning then? I mean, are all the people who are voting for him?
Read those pieces when you get home. I'm
Yeah, there's-
serious. They're fantastic.
You said that.
Rolling Stone and the Atlantic Monthly.
David Frum, F-R-U-M, wrote the Atlantic Monthly piece.
In a nutshell, I mean, in a sentence or two, it's what's been said. I mean, primaries again are drawing more of the extremes. Trump has successfully tapped into a legitimate angst against Washington. He's tapping into some of these populist issues that border on the demagoguery, which, as you know, is what you play on populist desires and more than the reality. And there's some anger that he's a voice to. He's entertaining, and I think people are playing along with that. But that's it in a nutshell. And then these other pieces will dive much deeper.
This quoting the one sentence of the Frum piece does a real disservice to the piece, and of course I'm going to do it anyways. But there's one sentence in there. He said the Trump voter is the person who gets really pissed off when he's on the phone and hears press 1 for English. And that is the Trump voter.
But you would think that after a while, the other people running for office, like the Rubios, like the Cruzes, like Carson, like any of them out there, all right? They would get the idea. The reason that Trump is popular is because he's anti-establishment. He's against everything that's come out of Washington in the last 6
But these
8,
other
10
people
years.
are products of Washington.
And everybody that's running against him is a product of the
Yes, and that's part of hate. And that's why it's a little bit dangerous to completely write him off, because he's tapped into something that we didn't see coming.
Supreme Court nomination a little bit, given what the Republicans may be facing, why wouldn't they want to look at a nominee now?
The question, because people watching this on their computers aren't going to be able to hear the question, is could we talk a little bit more about the Supreme Court and why Republicans wouldn't want to put forth a candidate, or accept a candidate to at least debate now before they potentially lose everything?
It's a great question. It really is.
And it's one the party's
think
asking.
The rumblings are that Obama is going to appoint a moderate Republican, which would be really brilliant. The Republicans almost always overplay their hand, and that's what they're looking at. That's why they're looking at this mess now. And Obama's, there's a reason Obama beat them badly twice in a row. And I looked, they could overplay their hand on this, and this could be another thing that backfires on them.
And they are overplaying. As you know, today, the president invited Republicans to discuss and submit some possible options, and he knew, of course, they would not, and Democrats did, and Mitch McConnell is standing his ground saying, why would we? We've told you we will not consider anyone. We will not vote on anyone. You're done. But that's the overplay.
Back to Mitch McConnell, is, according to the Times, has given Republican senators permission, if you will, to run against Donald Trump if they're up in the election in their home states, if they choose to do so. Yes.
Dr. Bennett on 1420 gave Donald Trump a lot of positive PR. Did anybody hear that this morning? He had his 2 sons on and his wife in the last couple days, and he was really gave him good positive PR. And I wondered if you knew if Sarah Palin was still behind him.
I guess, I missed the first one. You said Dr. Bennett?
1420.
Oh, okay. I
He's
didn't see it.
She wants to know about Dr.
Oh,
Jim Bennett, Bill Bennett.
Bill. Okay.
He's a smart guy.
Known from
Yeah, I do.
And then the follow-up was, do we know if Sarah Palin's still behind him? I mean, I don't know that anybody knows what Palin's thinking minute to minute, but I don't think she does. But yes, she's still there. But I think he sees and recognizes, I would think, that she's a liability. But
She was a 20-minute wonder in the campaign when she gave that speech that made absolutely no sense, and nobody's heard from her since.
I remember I was on a bus going to Warren, Ohio with John McCain in 2008. And the bus, it was a private fundraiser, and the bus got lost. And Joe Hallett from the Dispatch, a wonderful retired columnist, wrote a column about how awful it was because we couldn't think of anything to ask John McCain, because at that point in the campaign, and this was later, he wouldn't answer any questions about Sarah Palin. You know, it had become such a liability. You know, we'd already asked about health care and all these issues, and we're getting the same thing, and there we are in the back of the bus with them, and it was the most excruciating thing I'd ever been through. And it really was the Palin effect. I mean, on several occasions, I was on press buses where, you know, all they wanted to do was like, well, why would you, you know, they were talking about war issues, and you got someone with no foreign policy experience, and just hammered away and away, and it was over.
Yeah, I have no idea. We don't know what's happened. Tina Fey probably wondered what happened to her, too.
Sir, go ahead.
Doesn't Donald Trump create chilling historical parallels to the rise of Hitler?
People have said that. I don't know.
The question was, does Donald Trump reflect historic parallels to Hitler? No, because I still think Trump is so much more of an entertainer in his own mind, and you know he hasn't been building an empire of, you know, like the Third Reich or anything like that.
No, I don't think he means half the stuff he says.
And I think some of there's today on the internet in one of the stories, or Politico, I mean, like there's the New York Times supposed taped off-the-record interview in which he was really, the implication is that basically all this hype and all this stuff he says about the wall and immigration isn't actually how he feels, and that's why there's a real call for the New York Times to release this. And so, no, I don't see a parallel because I don't buy it from Trump.
I don't either. However, his handling or mishandling of the David Duke stuff was pretty disturbing.
I think he ran. I mean, I
The question is, why do we think Donald Trump ran?
like he's done everything else, and he said, oh, you know, I've done this, I had a TV show.
I don't think he thought this was going to happen. I think he's so deep in it now, he's got to keep going. Don't you think he's surprised, too, when he pinches himself in the morning?
The last time he ran, he was obliterated and embarrassed, and I couldn't even believe when he first started moving again that I thought maybe he just wants to have a voice, like many people run. I mean, Dennis Kucinich did it. He never really believed he could win, but it was a platform for the issues, and Dennis was far more sincere than Trump. I mean, he believed in Department of Peace and all these other things that he promoted. But I guess if you're in Trump's shoes now, money cannot buy you the power that the presidency gets you. So he's going for it.
Okay, one more. Yes.
Hillary's emails are going to take her with the
I think
FBI.
that's obviously a landmine that's out there, and that, boy, if that blows up on her in August or September or something, then all bets are off.
I mean, the only thing in her favor is that there's been so many iterations of the email story about a different, you know, FBI looking at this and the servers, that I don't know that the public can keep track or follow. It would have to be a pretty big bombshell that's pretty clean and clear on what she gave out. I mean, she's not you know, the Republicans want to argue that she's, you know, should be held for treason, but, you know, she sent classified, I mean, what they're looking at is, did she send classified materials to herself? It's not like she gave it to a foreign country. Did it go to her own private personal server? But there's been a lot of iterations in it, and I honestly, I barely can follow it. So something would have to come out simple enough for the voters to get around, because right now it's easy to diffuse, and she constantly has been able to step out of this thing, because there's just 1 minute someone's saying, well, there wasn't anything on it, and someone else said, well, yeah, there was, but they were reclassified, and now there is. I think there is trouble there for her.
And this is a very controlling crowd, the Clinton crowd. The Republican candidates, they answer questions from the press, out for 4 or 5 times every day. She hasn't held a news conference, something, I read it today, in 50 or 80 days. And, you know, they're very controlling. The Clintons are always that way.
And reporters are there to ask her. I mean, they will ask her about the emails.
You get no access to her, and it's very scripted campaign. Okay, one more.
Yesterday on Chuck Todd's show, they were talking about Romney making a possible third
Too late to get on the ballot. That's the problem.
You can't get any delegates if you're not on, if you didn't qualify.
Two things about that, and I don't know, did Henry report this? He might have.
Henry Gomez at Cleveland.com has been covering the campaign, does a great job. He has a morning newsletter and a roundup that takes everything and boils it down for you and gives you a link.
Does, and it's a great thing. And it's, Romney apparently called Kasich and urged him to get out of the race, and Kasich blew him off. But there have been rumblings for days that Romney's about to endorse Rubio. Well, maybe he should do it pretty soon, don't you think, if he's going to do it? Okay, thank you for coming, all of you. Bye-bye.